Here's a study where medical doctors seem to be taking credit for the ways that naturopathic doctors reduce cardiovascular risk factors. Now, first of all, metabolic syndrome is a risk factor for heart disease. The naturopaths reduce the prevalence of metabolic syndrome along with usual medical care by 17% over a year. So what does this really mean? How did they work the study so that the doctors ended up taking credit for teaching their patients a healthy lifestyle and the importance of nutrition?
Yeah, it sounds pretty silly, doesn't it? Well, in medicine, see, we like to give the idea that we do everything. And we talk about everything, but we give it lip service and a lot of the time don't practice it. When you're talking about lifestyle, I mean, let's face it, we're not the experts in lifestyle. The naturopaths are.
So before we go on with this, why don't you define what a naturopath is?
Okay, these are people who go to a four-year school, just like doctors go to four-year medical school, and they learn natural ways to try and take care of people's illnesses. They try to work on wellness and prevention. They have to use nutrition and natural therapies rather than using invasive drugs or technologies. And really, they go hand in hand, and it would be great if doctors would assume that kind of responsibility, but basically they're not. So we need to give them credit for what they do and honor it. And what happened in this particular study that was actually published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in April of 2013 is they looked at 207 postal workers who had been going to doctors, and they had heart disease. And what they did is they added to it what naturopaths do, which means they're doing things like weight loss and using some exercise and supplements, things like essential fatty acids, omega-3s, fiber, coenzyme Q10, L-carnitine, things like that. And then a year later, seeing how they did. And what they found is that over that period of time, like Vicki said, 17%, they did 17% better than the doctors who just went to the cardiologist or their internist.
But what's interesting to me, though, is that the way they did this study was that they did it with the naturopaths with the medical doctors, but they didn't do the naturopaths without the medical doctors to see how the results would turn out. Almost like they didn't trust if they just did it the natural way.
Well, they may not have wanted to know, because we know because of the experience we've had with people who are cardiologists doing these stents and cardiac surgeries. And that was the cat's meow for a lot of years. And I'll have to admit, back in the 70s and 80s, I was guilty of that too, because we all assumed that what we were doing by fixing these blockages was going to extend life. But what we found is that that wasn't the case at all. In fact, only in about 3% of people who are stable, who have major blockages of their arteries, will benefit from a stent or bypass procedure.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of assumptions that are made, like it seems like it would make sense,
Yeah.
but then later on when they do the studies and they find out that it really doesn't.
Right.
So we're talking about how they made a difference with metabolic syndrome. So why don't you define what metabolic syndrome is?
Okay, what we're looking at there is people who have abdominal girth, that's a waist that's too big. They have a problem with insulin resistance because when you have that middle that's big like that, for some reason there's an association with that, and that causes problems with low HDLs, which are the good cholesterols, high triglycerides. It converts sugar into fat more easily, and it gets stored in the fat cells where it gets stuck. There's a tendency towards hypertension. So when we see that syndrome, we know that we're at a higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes and all the complications that go with it that include heart attacks and strokes. So that's what we're looking at here. So we should be finding a way where we can work together with naturopaths. Why don't we just acknowledge that doctors don't do that? There's not much return on investment, I guess, from treating people that way for the insurance companies and for this pharmaceutical industry.
Because they focus on wellness and prevention instead of sick care.
Well, that's right. So if we didn't have so many people sick, we didn't need so many drugs, we didn't have so much in the way of health insurance, these companies wouldn't make any money. So they basically are holding in check, in my opinion, a lot of the reason why doctors still don't look at lifestyle medicine as important. So I would say let's bring the naturopaths forward. Let's give them more of a central role, because in the future, the medicine is going to be wellness, prevention, nutrition, natural therapies, and only using the wonderful technologies that we have in medicine when they're called for in situations where the rest doesn't work.